Welcome to the Explainer. You know, when the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee lays out his game plan, it really tells you where the political battle lines are being drawn. So today, we're going to break down a recent interview with Congressman Jim Jordan to get a handle on exactly what his committee is looking into and why it all matters.
Okay, let's dive right in. This idea of getting to the truth, that was the drumbeat throughout the entire interview. This quote from Chairman Jordan really sets the stage for everything we're about to cover, from fraud allegations all the way to a deep dive on the Department of Justice.
So how did this wide-ranging conversation break down? Well, let's kick things off with the first major area of focus, these big allegations of fraud.
Yeah, right out of the gate, the interview just zeroed in on claims of massive, widespread fraud in government spending. So you might be asking, where exactly is all this alleged fraud happening? Well, the chairman pointed to two specific, huge areas, and they're both tied to these recent massive waves of government spending.
The core argument he made was pretty simple. When you send that much money out the door that quickly, fraud is almost a given. He talked about COVID relief funds, he talked about Medicaid, and then things got a little more pointed. He brought up Minnesota, suggesting that from his perspective, investigations there might have been slow-walked for political reasons.
And from that broad issue of fraud, the conversation then zoomed in on a very specific, and let's be honest, very controversial figure, Representative Ilhan Omar.
So two key things were put on the table here. First, her supposed connections to groups accused of fraud, and second, this graphic that's been making the rounds online suggesting a huge jump in her personal net worth. Chairman Jordan made it pretty clear his committee plans to dig in and get to the bottom of it. But here's where we need to make a really key distinction. When he was asked about that net worth graphic, Chairman Jordan was actually very careful. He said flat out that he didn't know if it was accurate. So he was framing it not as a confirmed fact, but as a big question mark that he believes his investigation needs to answer. And this focus on investigation, well, that leads us directly into the next huge topic of the interview, the committee's intense scrutiny of the Department of Justice and the FBI.
To really make his point about what he sees as a problem at the DOJ, Chairman Jordan kept coming back to one major high-profile case as his prime example, the January 6th pipe bomb.
And right here, he painted this picture of two completely different Justice Departments. On one hand, he described years of failure to solve the case under the Biden administration. On the other, he talked about what he called good old-fashioned police work under new leadership, crediting officials like Kash Patel. In his telling, the difference was literally night and day. And in his view, the pipe bomber case wasn't just a one-off. He started listing other controversies. You've got a memo on Catholics, the Jack Smith investigation, the White House cocaine incident, really trying to build his case that the previous DOJ leadership was either inept or, worse, politically biased. He also made it crystal clear that the committee's investigation into Special Counsel Jack Smith is really heating up. They've already deposed 3 of Smith's top deputies, and he says the next major step is to bring in the special counsel himself for a deposition. Okay, so you get Jack Smith in the hot seat for a deposition. What's the number one thing they want to ask him about?
The main issue, as Jordan lays it out, is all about the timing. He's asking, why on earth would the special counsel need 2 months of phone records from the sitting Speaker of the House for an investigation into something that happened 3 years earlier? The unspoken question, the implication there, is that maybe the motive was more political than investigative.
You know, this whole theme of government overreach, it doesn't just stop with investigations. It bleeds right into a massive upcoming legislative battle, one that pits national security directly against American privacy rights.
The whole fight is about a really controversial surveillance law called FISA Section 702. And to put it in simple terms, Chairman Jordan described it as a program that creates a giant haystack of information about all sorts of people, all collected by the government.
And this slide right here shows the simple but really profound change he's trying to make. The idea is, before the government can go digging through that haystack, looking for information on a specific American, they would have to do one critical thing first: go to a court and get a warrant.
And if you want to know just how high the stakes are here, get this. He pointed out that a previous vote on this exact warrant requirement ended in a tie, 212 to 212. It failed by the slimmest possible margin. I mean, it just doesn't get any closer than that.
So finally, you take all of this, the investigations, the legislative fights, and it all culminates in a look at the bigger political picture. How does the chairman actually see his party holding on to its power in Congress?
History usually tells us that the party in the White House loses seats in the off-year elections. But Chairman Jordan laid out a three-part strategy for how Republicans could, in his words, defy history. He's betting on their economic policies, on drawing a sharp contrast with the Democrats, and on the voter turnout that President Trump can generate.
And that really leaves us with the big, lingering question. We've just walked through a very clear agenda of investigation and a real push for legislative change, but at the end of the day, is all this aggressive oversight actually going to lead to reform? Or will it just add more fuel to the fire and lead to even deeper political gridlock? That's really the million-dollar question at the heart of all this.